So this woman has gone viral on X after posting an update from a Wall Street Journal op-ed she published. So for some background information, I believe she's a graduate student, or she was a graduate student in Santa Clara University, which to my understanding is a Jesuit university. Correct me if I'm wrong there. She was in a therapy program or like some sort of psychology program at the university. And she had been struggling for a while, it seems, to get accommodations to do some of the classwork. She was asked to do things that she was not comfortable participating in some of the topics that were being discussed as part of her program. She documents a lot of this on her Substack. So her name is Naomi Epps Best. I would highly recommend reading some of her stuff. This is an example of something she had posted recently about topics she was supposed to discuss as part of her program. So she had some issues with that, and in her op-ed, she talks about how she asked for an accommodation. Apparently there was a similar accommodation is given to Muslim students on campus, where they're allowed to participate in classwork via Zoom, and they have different assignments. She was denied access to those accommodations. She also noted, or I might have read this somewhere, she's a newlywed, so she's 26 years old, a newlywed, and the mother of a 1-year-old child. So she's a young wife and a young mom, and she basically doesn't want to participate in some of the, what I would call like woke ideology stuff that's going on at university campuses. And she was told no. So she obviously wrote in the Wall Street Journal kind of what she's been experiencing. Now, after that was published, she lost her job. She was in an internship, it looks like, and she was fired basically for refusing to follow the ideology and conform to the ideology that's part of her profession. So I'll share this video and then talk a little bit more about why this is more significant than people realize.
Moments ago, I was fired from my therapy internship for blowing the whistle in the Wall Street Journal on ideological conformity in therapy training. This comes with the regret of my boss, but he was left no choice due to the climate we are now in. This will harm clients. I am not doing this for personal gain. I am doing this because if we don't have a set of therapists with diverse worldviews and with tolerance for people with diverse worldviews, we will alienate people who need psychological care, and we will cause more harm than good. Please help me by sharing this. I don't know what's next for me. It could get worse. I've been in contact with people who have large platforms, which I am grateful for, and I will talk to anybody, left, right, or center. This is not a partisan issue. This needs to be brought to the public attention. It is a crisis in therapy.
Okay, so there's a lot here. I think the obvious talking point that people are focusing on is about mental health, and this has been my observation, and I've been through different rounds of therapy. I never worked with therapists, though, that you would bill under your insurance. I always worked with like coaches, and I paid 100% out of pocket. I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but I was more selective, I guess, of who I worked with. So that's why I bring that up. But there seems to be some issues, and it stems from mental health. So there's like a rising mental health epidemic. We're clearly seeing data of this. Men are struggling, and they're not getting the help they need for obvious reasons. You have a bunch of feminist women who have graduated through programs like the one she's in, and they're coming into the profession, and there's a lot of ideological conformity. But then you're obviously seeing like manifestations of this with like the obvious one is the trans issue. I don't know. It seems really interesting to me that all of a sudden, magically, in the last handful of years, that kids have started becoming trans all of a sudden, and gender dysphoria is now a thing, and there seems to be a correlation between the increased preponderance of mental health diagnoses that are leading to trans identification within children, and professions like teaching and therapy and counseling that are dominated by women, which, if what she claims in her essays and her op-ed to be true, these programs are kind of grooming people within a specific ideological framework. Sometimes it's referred to as critical theory, wokeism, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. But there seems to be a correlation here. Like, I don't think any of this has come up in a vacuum. And she seems to like hit the nail on the head a little bit of what's going on. So a lot of people have been focusing on that, and I think rightfully so. I want to focus on a different aspect of this. So this is a woman who has spoken out against ideological conformity and the lack of diverse viewpoints. So notice that she's not claiming she's being discriminated against. She just has a different perspective. And she's implicit in that perspective, obviously, is challenging the dominant ideology within, like, the, I guess, mental health, social work, counseling profession. But she's challenging it. And so she's being punished for it. But I want to call attention to something I wrote a little while ago about ideological conformity. And I titled this piece, Republicans Need Not Apply. It's not just about Republicans, like it goes both ways, but it's this idea where if you don't adhere to a specific ideological belief, you're going to be excluded from certain jobs and certain industries within the workforce. And we're seeing that come up more and more. And it's interesting because in the past, I don't know that this was common, and maybe it was, and maybe I'm totally off base, so please tell me if I'm wrong. But in the past, and like even in my own work experience, like I worked with people and had different opinions than them, but that didn't necessarily stand in the way of us working together. Like, we could discuss and debate things, but there wasn't the rigidity that we're seeing now. So I wrote this piece basically literally about what this woman is talking about, how people are being excluded from jobs, kicked out of jobs, because of how they view things. So I highlight in here a piece that was published in the Free Press by Uri Berliner. Uri Berliner was an editor at the New York Times, or at NPR, for more than 2 decades. And he left in April 2024, so last year, after he published this op-ed in the Free Press. And I think he was basically pushed out of NPR. But in his piece, I highly recommend reading it, but one of the things he raised is that there was a lack of viewpoint diversity. So he writes, concerned by the lack of viewpoint diversity, I looked at voter registration for our newsroom in DC, where NPR is headquartered and many of us live. I found 87 registered Democrats working in editorial positions and 0 Republicans. None. And this isn't to say like there were no Republicans or there were no conservative-leaning people, but if you're using political affiliation as a proxy for like ideological conformity and diversity of opinions, like this is a really strong indictment against NPR. Like everyone kind of thought the same thing. If the majority of the people were registered Democrats and there were no overt, like proud to be Republicans on the staff, that really shows that there is ideological conformity. And so when you have a woman like this, who comes forward and says that she was fired because she didn't hold to the ideological line. The same thing happened to Warren Smith, who's on YouTube, the Secret Scholars Society, I believe. He was a teacher, I think in Massachusetts, and he recorded a video of having dialogue with a student, just asking the student about J.K. Rowling and like why this student believes certain things about J.K. Rowling, and just like helping the student think through the thoughts. But because the underlying premise of the conversation was the trans issue, he was fired from his job as well. And so you have 3 examples here. You have Uri Berliner, who was a seasoned editor at the NPR. You have a teacher in a school who's just having a normal critical thinking session with a student. And then you have this individual here who was interning and working towards her credentials to be a what I presume is a licensed therapist, being let go because she didn't toe the ideological line. And I think this is a really bad place for us to be in, because it reveals how ideology is shaping the workforce and shaping access to job opportunities within the workforce. And I've personally experienced this to some degree, not quite like this, but I was doing a lot of freelance writing, and I kind of stopped pitching, honestly. I was pitching article ideas and I was pitching content, and I've stopped doing that because I realized that the vast majority of editors I was pitching didn't share the same worldview as me. And all they would have to do is open up my Substack to see what I believed, and they could easily decide not to work with me. And, that's fine. That's their prerogative, and I understand that. But every editor I found on LinkedIn that had, she, her pronouns in her bio, like, it made me feel like it was a losing battle. Like, why would I want to waste time pitching my intellectual property and selling articles to these people if they see me as an ideological enemy? So I've personally stopped doing that. Just because it just doesn't seem like it's a winning battle. But this, this is something I wrote about here, and the reason why I wanted to bring it up is because we're entering into a new work landscape where employment opportunities are going to become increasingly scarce. And so it's no longer about your qualifications, your credentials, or merit for that matter. It's very tribalistic. So are you one of us? Like, if you went to Harvard and you're part of the Harvard crowd, like you're one of them, they're going to hire their own, right? So there's tribalism that falls on socioeconomic lines and where you went to college, if you went to a specific high school where you grew up, like those kinds of social affiliations. But then there's also ideological conformity. And there's people who are going to choose to hire or not hire people based on where you fall on the ideological spectrum. And I'm highlighting people who have lost jobs and people who are, I would say, more critical of the prevailing ideology, but it also goes the other way as well. So people who are in the current ideology, especially Gen Zers, I think they're having a hard time finding employment right now as well, because employers don't want to take a risk on someone who's going to be a problem. If there was a study a survey that came out of employers, and if you're if you're a woman, for example, because of Me Too, employers are hesitant to hire you, especially if they're men, because they don't want to be caught up in a false allegation. They don't want to be caught up in issues, and they just don't want to deal with it, right? So they're not hiring women because they're women. They're not hiring women because of the ideology that comes with feminism and the risk it poses to the day-to-day operations of a business. Same with the Free Palestine protesters. Employers have been surveyed about that as well, and they're hesitant to hire college students who are graduating or recently graduated who have participated in those protests because it symbolizes that you're pushing back against authority, but you're participating in protests for the sake of protest. You don't really a lot of these kids don't really understand what they're protesting, and so you're protesting for the sake of protest. So if you bring an activist, recent graduate into your company, what are they going to demand next? What are they going to do? And this is a fair question. If you're a kid who was protesting at Columbia, okay, you go to your company that employs you, and then let's say you find out that 3 members on the board of directors have ties to the state of Israel. What are you going to do in that situation? Are you going to throw a hissy fit? Are you going to barricade yourself in a boardroom until they're fired from the board? These are legitimate questions that I think employers rightfully ought to right to ask. But this is going both ways. So instead of having more diversity in the workforce, we're having more exclusion, and the exclusion is coming on different fault lines. And one of these fault lines is ideological conformity or the lack thereof. And I think this is this is dangerous because it's keeping people who want to work out of the workforce, and it's really institutionalizing segregation, social segregation and socioeconomic segregation. And I mean, I get it. Like, now that I wasn't aware of like the mental health stuff and the ideology stuff when I was actively seeking out mental health care. But now that I'm more aware of it and I'm seeing things with a new lens, like, I'm skeptical. Like who do you go to for help now? Or, you know, if medical professionals, like, there were so many medical professionals who just blindly, you know, were following what was being told by the government on how to handle the pandemic, you know, and new information has come to light in the years that have passed, and people are still stuck in their ways and adamant that they were right, even though new information challenges their correctness. You know, and you have to ask yourself, okay, like, even if we're not talking about employment perspective, even if you're just a consumer, it's like, okay, where do I go? Like this is a question I've been asking myself. Like, do I need to like seek out certain types of doctors and healthcare providers? Like there are certain things that like dissuade me from going somewhere. Like, if I see and this isn't to be like offensive or anything, but like, if I see a barbershop or a hair salon that has an LGBTQ flag on it, like, I'm not going to go there, because like, hair for me isn't political. Like, I need like to know I'm getting my hair cut or you know, whatever, from someone who is competent and knows what they can do. Like, so I'm looking at other things like healthcare the same way. Like, I had a kind of bad experience the last time I went to Planned Parenthood for just a routine, you know, women's health service. And I'm like, okay, like, you know, do I need to start like looking at certain things and like determining how, I guess, like, choosing who to go to and who not to go to, in much the same way, like, several years ago there was the boycott against Chick-fil-A because they were anti-LGBTQ. Like, are we seeing the pendulum swing the other way now? And you know, that sucks, right? Because I don't think anyone wants to like not patronize a business over another based on your ideology, but it's clear like this has gone past something you actually like believe in your head and something you believe in your personal life, and it's become public. And once it's public, you know, I think that's when people are deciding to vote with their wallets, and people are losing jobs because of it. And, you know, people did with the pandemic, obviously, but we're seeing it more and more now as well across different aspects of the ideology. So I just want to raise that. I think it's really interesting, like I said, because we're moving into this new future of work where employment opportunities aren't going to be as accessible as they once were. And I think rigidity along ideological lines is going to have a material and an economic consequence within communities. And I think this is something worth thinking about. Like, do we want to continue on this path? Do we want to exclude people from the workforce, hardworking, well-meaning people, simply for what they believe? Is that something that we want to practice here in the United States? I think that's a fair question we should start asking. If you enjoyed this video, I would love it if you would like and subscribe. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.